Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. Rusty and Heather Bryant back with another episode, and we're glad to be here. It's been a busy month and another busy month coming up, and we are so excited about everything that's on the horizon for the Redeemed Marriage. But we're really excited that you are here with us. We're excited that you take a part of your week, usually on Mondays, because that's when we come out with these. And most of you listen to them faithfully every Monday. Hey, if you've never done this before, take a second on whatever podcast platform you listen to and give us a rating and a review, especially on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Leave us a 5-star rating or 4, 3, 2. Please don't. 5-star would be great. And take a second to write a little bit of a review because it just helps so much to get our podcast higher up in the rankings so that more people get a chance to listen to this. And we're blessed. We have a ton of listeners from all over the world, and we're so grateful for each one of you, and we don't take it for granted that you take time to spend with us each week. So today, great topic, and let me give you guys a little bit of a background on why we started thinking about this. Some of it has to do with last week we talked about boundaries, and so this kind of leads into that a little bit. But today, I actually heard a sermon on Judas, which rarely happens. People are scared to say the name Judas. And, of course, for those of you who may just not really have a church background, but Judas is the apostle, the disciple that betrayed Jesus. And he's the one that took a bribe, basically, accepted money to basically turn Jesus in right before his crucifixion. And so one of the things that was pointed out was just how it wasn't, he didn't just decide that day, right, I'm going to betray Jesus. I'm going to turn Jesus in. There was a pattern of behavior for him, and it actually speaks of it in John, in the book of John, because out of the 12 apostles, for whatever reason, Judas was the one that was in charge of the finances. He would be sort of like you in our relation. Not really. He was in charge of the finances, and so he kept up with the money from the apostle, and like the money that came in to, I'm sure, to help with their ministry and what Jesus was doing. And it even mentions that he was complaining about someone that was offering perfume to anoint Jesus, and he made some comment. Judas said, I can't believe that. It could be used for feeding the poor. But then the next part says, but he was stealing from the funds, which is that's so real life today, how we do things. We could be in the midst of the greatest sin, and we're pointing our fingers at somebody else.
It's the classic speck and log. Like you can't see the log and speck in somebody else's eye because of the log in your very own.
So when some of us started discussing that, the comment was made.
Some of us. Okay, it's okay.
At church. When we were discussing this afterwards, and somebody made a comment and said, there had to have been behavioral patterns along the way, and 11 disciples that were following Jesus, and you have to wonder, did somebody not ever say, hey, what's
going on with
what's
Judas?
going on with Judas, and shouldn't we have more? Where's all the money? Like, shouldn't we have more money than this? And I mean, as far as we know, he wasn't approached, even to the point when Jesus finally said, somebody's going to betray me. And, it doesn't say that any of them were like, I bet it's Judas, because that dude's
gonna be him.
It's got to be him,
right,
because he's stealing the money and stuff.
Right.
And so it just made me start thinking how so many things I think could potentially be avoided if people would speak up and speak truth, and if we just had the guts to do that, and also the guts to listen. I mean, look, Jesus called him out and said, somebody's going to do it. And he says, well, is it me? And he goes, well, you're the one that spoke. So basically, you're the one. And then he still did it.
Yep.
But
even after he said he wouldn't.
Yeah. So I started thinking just about how you never, I mean, Judas did not wake up. It was a series of choices and a pattern of behavior that got him to where he was and where his heart was, in a place where he could betray Jesus. And so when we allow sin to creep into our life, that's what it does. It creeps in. And it's not like we just hit this big old sin all at one time. Right. It's little steps along the way. And I believe that there are people that recognize these things about other people and they never say anything.
Right.
And so what I want us to do today is just talk a little bit about that and also challenge you. So if you're listening to this and maybe you're one of those that you're listening to us, but you're not really doing anything about it. Maybe you're pointing your finger at somebody else.
Yeah.
It's pretty classic. And then also there's lots of you that are listening and you know people and you're seeing things that they're doing, certain types of behavior, compromises that are being made, but you're scared to say anything.
Yeah.
And so we want to just challenge you a little bit today.
Which is why we were so hardcore last week about boundaries, is those are the things that, some of the things that we were lenient on, which led to some of the behaviors that nobody spoke into. So
and we can even start right there. If you're one of these that has been listening, maybe you even listened to last week's episode on boundaries and you thought to yourself, that's not important for me. Or, no, they're talking to somebody else. They're not talking to me because I got this under control. Well, I mean, the challenge is we want you to listen to us because maybe there's not somebody else in your life that's speaking into you.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think maybe that's the first question that I would have for people is, are you living life in such isolation that there's nobody that you've even given permission to speak truth to you and to speak into your life? And if that's the case, that's a dangerous place to be because most of the sin begins in isolation because it's secret. And if you can keep it a secret, then you think you have it all under control.
Right.
And so my question there would be, who is it that you've allowed into your life that can speak truth, that I mean, I don't even want to say that you've given permission, but I'm not saying you've walked up to somebody and say, I give you permission to speak truth to me. But you know the people that you're close enough to that if they see something that's off about you, they would say something.
Right. And are you surrounding yourself with the type of people that need to speak truth into your life? Because there may be, your close friends at work or your close friends wherever, even if they saw something, it wouldn't be a red flag to them because maybe they aren't living lives that are honoring to the Lord. So you have to make sure that you have people that would speak biblical truth to you if there was something that was a red flag for them.
Yeah, and the last couple of weeks, actually, one of the words that keeps coming to me that I think we should do a podcast on at some point is community. And I think the reason why it's been such a big deal to me is because we have sort of built a community in some ways around the redeemed marriage where people are feeling comfortable either speaking with us or even in a group setting because now that we have the mentoring group where It's a large group
Right.
setting of people that have already been through our marriage coaching, and so they're feeling comfortable sharing in a on a Zoom call that's a
Yeah.
large group. But I think so much of that is just the willingness to not be isolated, not live outside of community,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it requires you to actually take a step and build some community.
Right.
It's not going to just come to you all the time.
Right.
And so you have to make an effort. You have to take some steps. And I think that that's important, is just making sure that your community, like you said, is built of people that are pointing you towards Jesus and
Yeah.
pointing people that are for marriage.
That's right. Godly marriages. And it not only helps these people not feel alone, which we have seen is a huge part of this community, but also when you're talking to somebody that has the same boundaries and the same things that you have lined up, that you're like, okay, I don't feel so weird now, because the world would tell us that some of these boundaries we talked about are weird.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, that's extreme. Or, I don't want anybody controlling me like that. Or I don't have to answer to anybody. The world can give you that perception. But if you're walking with somebody that has the same values and the same I've lost the word that I'm looking for, but convictions. Thank you. That you have and that you're trying to aim towards in your marriage, then it's easier to have somebody speak into you like that. Because if you don't have the same, that's still not it.
The same.
It's going to come to
not
me.
Conviction?
No, it's like values are the same. Principles, all of those things. Like you just want for people to be you want to walk with people who have the same values as you do.
Yeah. And so if you're somebody that's out there and you're not struggling in this area, that you're not the one that really needs to, look, you're listening to this podcast.
Sure.
And so that's an incredible start to it. And hopefully you're not dismissing the things that we're saying, and hopefully you're not going, oh, I hope some, so-and-so listens to this, like my husband or my wife.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to say. What if you're listening to it and you're like, I think I see this in my wife, or I see this in my husband, that these dangerous things, and I don't know how to speak into them.
Yes, and if you're curious about that, because we're not going to necessarily go down that path, go to our website, theredeemedmarriage.com, on the podcast page. Click on podcast, and there's a search bar, and search red flags. And we did a podcast, I think maybe last summer during our summer questions, because somebody asked about red flags and how do you approach your spouse when you see, how do you approach that conversation when you see the red flags? But yes, Heather's right in the same way. We need to learn how to speak truth even to our spouses. Yep. And, here's the thing. Looking back on our story, and as Heather was moving closer and closer into crossing the line of unfaithfulness, there were a couple of times where I brought it up, and it was just dismissed, and I was crazy, all that, and then I became a little bit scared to say anything because of what it was gonna, the fight that it was gonna cause. And so let's just talk for a minute about that. Let's say that you are someone that's listening, you've recognized in someone that you're in community with, someone that you're friends with, and you've just noticed that there's some things that are just uncomfortable.
Yeah. And
you feel like somebody should say something, but you're not saying anything.
It's not going to be me.
Yeah. So let's just talk through what would be some of the reasons for people just not saying anything.
Yeah. Well, the first one that comes to my mind is you don't want to damage the relationship. Like if you say to them that you suspect something, or not even using those words, that's kind of harsh for the first thing, but just, making them aware, like the way you talked to him or the hug was too long, or that was a little bit flirty. You don't want to damage the relationship, and I can see that being a big hindrance, like, because I look back and think, how would I have responded to someone if they said that? And we even had people tell you afterwards, "Oh, I knew something."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gosh, and I mean, how many times? I mean,
Yeah.
I
Several,
heard that
not
from
just
so
one.
many people, and I wanted to go, why didn't you say something?
Right.
I mean, you're telling me, oh yeah, I suspected. I mean, I saw the way that she acted, and I saw this in this setting, and I was like, where were you?
That's right.
I mean, yeah,
And that's hard. I mean, it's hard to go back and think, especially for you. I know, especially for you, that there were people who saw me at different public locations, and were worried about it, but then just didn't say anything. So that goes back to your question of what causes people not to say something. And I will say, nobody likes confrontation.
right.
Nobody likes confrontation. And so there's a lot of times that we don't speak into things because we're avoiding that confrontation and we don't want to damage relationship.
I think you're right. Most people don't like confrontation. There are some people that love confrontation, but they stink at it. Like they do it for the wrong reason, and so they don't know how, they don't handle it right. But for the people that don't like confrontation, if you can learn the art of doing it in the right way, then you can be really, really effective in speaking truth to people.
Yeah.
But there are people out there that just love confrontation, and so they just come and they just run at you like a bull in a china. Yeah, and then it doesn't sit well. It becomes defensive. All those things that you said.
And this wasn't really on our let's talk about that, but I will say, like, that's in life in general. When you talk to anybody, that there has to be some type of confrontation. The way you approach it is so important, that you're saying, even if somebody had come up to me and say, gosh, I'm so thankful. I mean, just positive stuff first, like, I'm so thankful that we're friends, and I love your outgoing personality and how people are drawn to you. But I just noticed something, how you approach it is so important, because if somebody had just come up and been like, well, you're flirting with, so-and-so, I would have gotten really defensive really fast.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I wouldn't have gotten defensive if somebody came to me in love and grace. I don't know the posture of my heart. I mean, I know that I was in a really, really dark place, but I don't know how I would have responded. But I can promise you nobody tried,
Well,
and that's the difference.
Well, and also if you're able to correct something when you've made the
Yes.
first wrong turn,
Way easier
it's
than
so much easier to go back and get on the right path
right.
than if you're so many miles
That's
down
right.
that road.
Because the further I got down that road, the more defensive I got.
Definitely.
Because I was convincing myself that I wasn't in the wrong. So at first I was probably a little bit more aware and attuned to, oh gosh, you may be right. But once I had convinced myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong, and convinced myself that I was in the right and that everything was fine and I had everything under control, like you said, the further I was down the road, the harder it would have been for somebody to speak into.
Well, when you try to approach somebody with something that's a difficult subject like that, you also you can't just go in pointing the finger at them. It's also got to be, it's not, oh, I'm better than you and I see this in you and so I need to point it out. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach it, but some of those would be like, hey, this is something that me and my spouse have really had to work hard at, because we have a problem with this, or we've seen this in other relationships, and so we've just had to put these big boundaries, things like that, where it's more of, hey, this is something that I deal with, and maybe it's even, hey, can maybe we hold each other accountable in this area?
Absolutely.
Things like that. I just think are so important in the way that we approach it.
Yep. Yep. I think another reason why people may not approach and say things is because they don't want them to think they're assuming the worst about them. Like I don't want to just be ugly, or I don't want you to think that I'm just assuming that that's something you would do, because I can even remember like feeling that, like before I walked through it, if you wanted to say something to somebody, it's like they would think, great, I'm glad you think that I would do something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
It feels so judgmental.
And I'm better than you.
Yeah.
Like if I say something, then I'm better than you, and I would never do anything like that. And so again, what you were just saying is it's so important how you approach it and how you go to somebody, and not just, damaging relationship, being confrontational. Those are just not healthy ways.
Do you think that even some of that, like when we're given all these reasons, do they feel a little bit selfish? Like, their reasons for not doing it, it kind of has a focus on, well, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to look bad. I don't want you to look at me differently. I don't want to mess up our relationship. And, I don't want you to think this about me because I've approached, it comes back to a little bit of selfishness. And I don't know, even looking back at the apostles, I just wonder how many of them would look at Judas after.
Is an apostle and a disciple the same word? Ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ish.
I just usually call them
But disciples are people that follow. So he had lots of disciples.
Okay.
Like people that were following Mary and Martha and Lazarus and all those people. But he chose 12 apostles.
I understand.
Yeah. So, I wonder if some of them would, after the fact, had to look at it and go, gosh, were my eyes on myself and I couldn't even see what was happening, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
gosh, I didn't even think about that. Like how they must have felt when Jesus was taken away. Like we were in relationship with the guy who turned him in.
Right.
And what if we had said something? It may have changed the fact that Jesus is on that cross.
Yeah.
That's
huge. And so I don't know. It just feels like some of those things are a little bit. I mean, I know people are going, no, it's not selfish. I'm thinking about the other person, but I don't know. Sometimes you can just turn that back around and go, no, you're really thinking about yourself. And so if you get your eyes off yourself and think about that person, it doesn't matter what it does to your relationship or like it's your responsibility if you see something to be able to speak some truth into that.
Right. And we're called to do that. We're called to speak truth and love to fellow believers.
Yep. And I know we've talked about this on another podcast, and you've said, your heart was in such a way, there was no way that you were going to listen to me.
100%.
And, there's a pretty good chance that you maybe weren't going to listen to other people, but you would have early on.
Sure.
And I think that's the big thing here is that you, and I just keep going. Why didn't people, why didn't somebody say something?
Right.
And what if they would have?
Right.
I mean,
and we don't know. And if you are happening to listening to this and you were like, oh gosh, I knew her back then and I saw things and I'm not mad at you.
No, we're not mad.
Like it's fine. Like that's not the point. Because who knows if I would have listened anyway.
Right.
The point is we are where we are, and we can go back and look at our story and see things that, gosh, if somebody would just hear this, and like Penny used to tell me all the time, please listen to me. Don't take the field trip. And so if you can, like if you're listening to this, I want you to say, gosh, like, I want to put that into place now. I want to invite community in. I want to invite truth speakers into my life to say, hey, if you notice anything, I need you to speak up. I need you to speak up. Because I think the other reason that we talked about was, and I believe it's more of a boy thing than a girl thing, is I can hear a boy thinking it's none of my business.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
that's not
that,
my
I mean,
business.
it's their marriage. That's none of my business.
Yeah.
It's none of my business what she's doing at that gym.
Yeah. They can, yeah, this is their thing. They can handle it. They can take care of it.
And I can see guys saying that more than girls. I think girls would be like, let me get up in your business.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, I think back to your story and our story, and I just wonder what would have been different or what could have been different. And then I think about where we are today, and I'm glad that we have this chance to speak into other people. And I am quite certain that we make people mad a lot of times.
I'm sure, because we did even on the boundaries thing last week.
Yeah.
There were a few people who were like,
Yeah.
we do. We probably make people mad.
Well, I think we make people mad. And I also think that when we speak really directly, even sometimes in our marriage coaching and things, I think we probably offend some people sometimes because they don't necessarily want to hear the truth. And, if you're one of those people, then, I mean, I just ask you to really consider why you have those feelings and why those feelings. Look, and the thing is, we don't always say the right things. So I'm sure I'm sure some of the times we've offended people and we need to probably say, I'm really sorry
I
that
didn't
we've
mean
offended.
to offend you.
But I do know this. You say it all the time. You say, you're not going to go and stand before the Lord one day and say nobody loved me enough to speak the truth.
That's right.
And so we have just learned there's not enough time. We have to speak the truth to people.
That's right.
And so, I do think I love the people that we've been able to do marriage coaching with through the last few years, because they come to us, almost all of them, with this attitude of, I'm ready to hear the truth. I want you to tell it like it is. We both need to hear the truth.
Right.
And for the most part, they're there because they know they need to be there, not just because my spouse needs to be here.
Right.
We need to be here together.
Right.
And so they're willing to do the hard work and work on it together.
Yeah. Guys, relationships are tricky. Relationships are hard. And they take hard work. I mean, and that's not just your relationship with your spouse. I mean, friendships. There's fractures. There's hard things. There's broken trust. All of those things, because we're two sinners. Even friendships, you're two sinners. You say hurtful things. You are selfish. You don't think of the other person. Like, all of those things in any relationship. And so if just looking at the marriage relationship and friendships that could speak into that, you can't avoid hard stuff sometimes. But that hard stuff that you speak into each other can actually do some really, really good things that can keep major catastrophes from happening.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of truth and love. And if you don't know how to do that, well, ask somebody. Ask a godly person, somebody at your church, and say, hey, I'm seeing this about my friend, and I need some guidance in how to speak into it.
Yeah.
Don't ignore it. Don't ignore it, because I wish that someone had said something to me or to you early on. And I hope and pray that there can be many things stopped by just listening to this and hearing, you know what, I need to speak a little truth and love.
Well, shameless plug would be you can pass along our podcast to somebody.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, I mean, and even if you have to use us as a discussion starter, or even blame us.
Yeah.
We don't care.
Yeah. And the other thing is it's not just for relationships that are in crisis.
That's right. And that's what I was actually thinking and where I was going with that. So you kind of read my mind. But no, because it's like you can go to somebody and you can say, oh my gosh, I've been listening to this podcast, and this is a couple that went through infidelity, and man, their story is crazy, but God redeemed it. And now they have all of these tools in their marriage tool belt that they're able to teach people and help people to not go down the same path, but just really to strengthen and grow their marriage and all of that. Look, I just gave you guys a commercial to use for us. But then you say, and I mean, we haven't gone through infidelity, but I think we get something out of it by listening to it. So I think you would love it.
Right.
Like that. Yeah, that's the attitude to have. And it's not. I do think, and I know there are people out there that are scared to share our podcast with people, because if I do, people are going to think I've had an affair.
Like, why are they listening to that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But most people are not like that. But we've had people say that. We've even had people say, gosh, I don't even know if, like, I love your T-shirts that you have, but I don't know if I want to buy one of your T-shirts, because then people will think that we need to be a redeemed. Right. We all need to be a redeemed marriage. Let's be honest.
And it just says redeemed. We're all redeemed.
We're all redeemed.
We are all redeemed. If you have accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior and ask Him to be Lord of your life, then you're redeemed. That's the point of the cross.
In fact, our new shirts they have our logo.
Has the stones.
Just has the stone logo on the back,
about
and it
marriage,
says redeemed.
Because I was like, you know what? I'm going to take that off. I just want it to say redeemed, because anybody can wear that. Yeah. Our children can wear that. Yeah, and with the stones on the back. So somebody would have to say, what is that on the back for to actually start that conversation?
Now there's people listening that are like, I didn't know you had shirts. They're going to reach out. Yeah. And they're going to be like, hey, how do I get one of those shirts?
Awesome. They're black, and they say redeemed. And it's the same font as my redeemed tattoo on my arm. Shameless plug for Robbie Followell for writing that.
Thanks, Robbie.
You the best.
Okay, I cut you off. You were about to say something because you went.
Oh, did I? Sorry, it's gone.
It's gone. Okay. Well, guess what else is gone?
Our time.
Our time. What a great segue into that. All right. Hey, guys, thanks so much for listening. We love all of you. We appreciate you taking the time out each week to join us on the Redeemed Marriage Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Peace.